All right. Happy Friday on the way home. Look, this chase is on fake news. See, here's the thing. The news is not necessarily fake. Editorial news is we consider mainstream media these days. Kind of dominates the space. Um, and for the most part, and I could even say throw some of the people on Fox News, for the most part, they get the facts straight. But this is where the around this cold snap that we've experienced in the Midwest and on the East Coast, this phenomena called the polar vortex. And last couple years, we've had this polar vortex come and freeze the hell out of us, and even now, it's reported as if this is just a normal occurrence. Like we should not be concerned about this. I mean, yesterday, just after reporting that now like 11 people have died in like one state from the cold, in like over a 2-3 day period, which I don't think is that uncommon in the Midwest of people dying in the cold. Like I don't find that uncommon, but I suspected, and I was right, that it is uncommon for it to happen at that rate in that short period of time, um, where you would expect to have that many deaths over the course of an entire winter, but not over the course of a couple days, and that's the issue. That being said, the nonchalant uh, reporting about how hell is freezing over, and it was just like literally there was laughter. Um, there was literal laughter in the this was on MSNBC, I think. Um, but I looked around like Fox News. There wasn't really a whole lot of it. Not that I can stand. I watched as much as I could stand to see, if they were talking about it, and they really weren't. Not. He just brought it up. It's cold. And that was it. So I want to shout out to Tom Hartman. It's a channel here on YouTube, THOM Hartman. Check it out. I've watched his channel a couple times, and both times his channel is very factual based before he gets to the editorial part, and his editorial isn't that far off. His opinion is based solely in the fact and not what he wants the fact to be, which I feel like is the problem with Fox and with some of the hosts on MSNBC and a lot of the hosts on CNN, where they report the news, and then the editorial is not an opinion or opinions on the fact, but it's what they wish the fact to be. And as far as guests are concerned, right-wing guests on left media, meaning right-wing guests on CNN and MSNBC, are notorious for this. You can look no further than what's his name, Steve. He's on CNN. Now I'm sorry, I just can't remember his name. But Boris was guilty of this. Man, why can't I remember Steve's name? Steve's Cuban American on CNN, and his opinion is so intellectually dishonest. It's ridiculous. So that being said, back to what's going on. If anybody remembers the day after tomorrow with Jake Gyllenhaal and how much criticism that movie took. Now, if you remember correctly, I remember when I watched it. Not before I watched the movie, I watched, read some information on like how the movie was written, and I thought it was interesting how the writers of the movie kind of combined some working hypotheses from a few different reputable scientists and science organizations, from NOAA, from so a few universities. They kind of took some hypotheses and kind of mashed them together, right? And to create the story because they needed to create some crisis when they were trying to. They did that in the attempt script to create a believable storyline, right? And that movie got just heckled. I mean, I remember some of the critics were very skeptical about the premise of the movie, and even myself, it was a little, it's a disaster movie. So I mean, you have to take the actions with a grain of salt. And the writers kind of made a bigger deal about where they got their information from than they probably should have. And I think they got a little bit more criticism than they maybe should have. Because what is funny is, in that movie, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's not a bad film. It's a little campy. It's a little sappy. I found more so than the weather events in the movie, the relationship between Jake Gyllenhaal and Dennis Quaid are a bit sappy. It's a little bit overdone. But it is what it is. But in that movie, what I was gonna say is, in that movie, the disaster is really strong hurricanes going places where they usually don't go, based on warmer ocean temperatures. What does a hurricane need to fuel itself? Warmer ocean temperatures. Okay, so a hurricane needs warm water to function. That's why hurricanes generally don't come very far north. And when they do, they're then called a nor'easter because they fuel themselves a little bit differently, right? What also came in that movie was a cold snap, a vicious cold snap that happened suddenly and quickly. And it was centered, that cold air was centered around the eye of these hurricanes. So it was kind of mashing some stuff together. And one of the things, I've been reading up on climate change even when that movie came out. Then, but the studies were already out there. They've been out there for decades. As far I found, that they've been out there for over 50 years. We've known these things are going to happen, and the oil companies have done a good job of keeping it from us, and dirty politicians as well. Not naming any particular parties and not naming any particular politicians. It's both sides. Republicans more than most, but it's not like there aren't Democrats on the oil payroll, and not just a couple. There's a lot. One of the things that we've started to notice is hurricanes have gotten stronger. They've also moved further north and a couple have morphed into nor'easters quite easily. So small storms that generally wouldn't have been a big deal then turn into Hurricane Sandy, which is kind of like a nor'easter, which hit all the way up in New York and New Jersey. Well, they called it Superstorm Sandy, but that was technically a hurricane that became a nor'easter. That happened. That has happened. We have had hurricanes further north than they normally would be. Yes. The strength of the hurricanes. We are getting close to the point where if we have a hurricane any stronger than we had last 2017, we will have created a new category for hurricanes. So a category 6. So we'll check that box, right? And now we talk about the cold. Well, this is the second or third year in a row we've had polar vortex. And I didn't know what it was until I watched the Tom Hartman show on YouTube, and he talked about the polar vortex and explained it very, very eloquently. I recommend you watch his video. I'm gonna butcher his explanation. But I've seen the explanation in science form, and I didn't get it, but he kind of explained it. But ultimately, it's a breakdown of the jet stream, the polar jet stream, which is the polar jet stream, and then the jet stream that pretty much goes around the northern hemisphere, the temperature of the air in those two movements of air is so drastic that they don't mix. But because ocean temperatures have been rising, because global temperatures have been rising, because the pole temperatures have been rising, the air that is further north has become warmer, which means that it is more likely to mix with the jet streams below. And one of the things that happens is that if that occurs, where the jet stream is weakest, the weakest point of that, where the temperature variation is the greatest, the polar air will shift almost like a cap. It won't be a perfect circle, but it's close. I mean, you can see where it's like melting ice cream. It's like if you're wearing somebody was wearing, he describes like somebody wearing a yarmulke, and it kind of drooped to the side. Well, it's more like it melted and drooped to the side, not just drooping down and dipping down into areas where polar air isn't normally, but in addition, it will put it will pull back and bring warmer air as it shifts behind it. So day before yesterday, there was a 106 degree, I think it was. Again, don't quote me. I'm trying to remember stuff I've seen, and this video has kind of been bothering me. I was deciding whether or not to make it. So these live streams, I just kind of talk off the cuff. But we're talking over 100-degree difference in polar temperature. Now that's still close to freezing, if not below freezing. I mean, that's how cold the Arctic should be around this time of year. That's a big shift in temperature. And if I'm wrong about that, because I may be conflating a couple things, but just right, the day that the first day of polar vortex, there was a huge shift in polar temperatures. There are sensors up there, so we know what the temperature is there year round. NOAA has temperature sensors and buoys all around the Arctic Circle and all of the North Pole. So we know what those temperatures are. And so back to what I was saying is that where the jet stream is the weakest, where the temperature variation is the highest, or where I would say where the temperature variation between the two jet streams is the smallest. So where the rise in temperature in that area has gotten so warm that the two jet streams start to mix, they kind of it's like a train track, two train tracks running in a circle, but then there's a merge somewhere in there, and then it separates again further around. Well, that area, go figure, is going to be over the United States. We burn the most fossil fuels on the planet, more than anyone, damn near combined, if not combined. So our temperatures above our continent are going to be abnormally higher, which is going to draw more warm air toward the Arctic Circle near us. And as the seasons change, the difference between climate and weather. So as the weather changes with the seasons and it gets colder in the northern hemisphere, our cold should be warmer, much warmer than the polar air, but it's not, because we've been warming the air above us. If you're not sure if that's actually happening, you can only look as far as the new shipping lanes that have been opened up in the Arctic Circle due to climate change. Like, anybody that denies climate change is you have to openly lie to yourself. Just in doing this video alone, I remembered something that I just realized was a thing, is that in the last 5 years, we've had cruise ships and tankers using the Arctic Circle as a shortcut. So basically going north of Canada to shortcut around the globe, because it's less distance on the globe to travel in the northern hemisphere rather than traveling closer to the equator. Well, that previously wasn't open. You couldn't even ice break it all the way across. Like, it was just too thick. Well, it's gone. Like, there's nothing there. There's no more ice. What used to be a frozen section of the world is no longer frozen. So yes, that area is going to bring more warm air. That water is definitely warmer. You have to remember that the water there is cold enough to keep ice frozen in salt water. So what am I saying with all this? I kind of think the day after tomorrow was kind of like not that far off. I mean, think about it. Did any scientist 70, 60, 70 years ago, I think it was 1950, so we're at almost 70 years ago, that first did the studies on this, did they ever say it was going to be a catastrophic overnight change? Nope. 50, 60 years ago? No. 50 years ago? No. 40? No. They all, the consensus on what will happen has been a gradual increase. So year over year, you will see a change in weather patterns. You will see a change in temperature patterns. Global warming does not mean winter gets warmer. Like, let's just go ahead and, that's not how that works. If you really think about it, that's not how that works. Global warming, climate change, means the climate is going to change. Yes, it's going to get warmer. But even with this polar vortex, right, the temperatures in the United States will be warmer than they were the year before. But we're not looking at just the United States. And that's where people, I feel like, because we don't travel as much as the rest of the world does, it's not because Americans are more ignorant. It's not because Americans are fat slobs or anything like that. As I know Europeans, the cultural, I guess the cultural thought about Americans that we're just too lazy to travel is that we can't travel the same way they can. You know, traveling from country to country is like driving state to state for us. But they do travel a lot more. I mean, they travel from continent to continent. Where we at most, travel, we don't really travel outside the country because our country is bigger than most European countries. So we don't really go going places, that are tropical. So we don't really notice the differences. We don't notice the change. I'll tell you this, as a guy on the men, the U.S. to the world, come on. What are you doing? And they went to Spain for the World Cup, the Field Hockey World Cup. While he was there, they were in the midst of a heat wave in Spain, where the temperatures had risen around 120, 130 in Spain. I mean, he said it was so hot, they rescheduled all their games at night, and it was still hot. That's a big difference. That's a big change in their daily weather patterns. Just like a below 0 Fahrenheit cold snap would be in Minnesota. A below 0 here in Maryland. We had I think we hit the lowest we hit where I lived. The temperature gauge near my house read 6 one day. I've lived here 20. Shoot, this is 2019. I've lived here for 25 years. It's never been that cold. Never been that cold. That's never happened before. That's a little bit more drastic than the changes in weather patterns that we've had, but it's still a change. It's not normal. And please, if you think that polar vortex is normal, read. The data is overwhelmingly concise. Anybody that is saying that the data is false, and I'm saying this from my own personal opinion, but if you are saying that the polar vortex, why it's occurring, how it's occurring, where it's coming from, and what it's doing, anyone, if you can look at the data, all of it, or part of it, any of it, and say that this has nothing to do with climate change, you're fooling yourself. You're lying to yourself. On climate change, again, another shout out. Very well done video. Bo of the Fifth Column dropped another gem. I mean, it was perfect. He talked about, he kind of touched on climate change, and it's like, and I've thought this way for years, right? This is before I cared whether or not people actually believed climate change science, right? Climate science, the overwhelming consensus, right? I'll say that I'll take, when it comes to science related topics, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to pretend like I know what the science is, right? All I can do is read the studies. But I'm going to take, the consensus The overwhelming consensus. If there's an over, if 90%, if out of 100 people in a specific field, if out of 100 of them, 99 of them agree, 90 of them agree. If 80 of them agree, 70 of them agree. There might be something to it. Just saying, because I don't do science, right? I'm in sales, right? If I tell a scientist that this widget sells over this widget, he's not going to look at me and say, well, I think you're wrong because I feel like there's no way that widget should sell better than this widget because this widget costs less and is better. But I'm telling you, it is what it is, and the why is almost irrelevant because it is what it is. Oh my gosh, the snow is killing me with these sensors. Yo, stop. Yeah, it is what it is, right? If I'm a botanist and I tell you that poison ivy makes you itch, and I have data to back it up, why? You can't tell a botanist that poison ivy doesn't make you itch just because someone else told you by the way, anybody that's denying climate science has a reason to deny it, right? You just look for the source, follow the money. Anybody that's denying climate science, 9 times out of 10, they're tied to one of two groups: the evangelical right or energy companies, usually oil companies. It's only one or the other. Like, the only two groups of organizations that are denying climate science. Well, they have an agenda, right? A climate scientist studies the climate. That's it. If you can look at anyone who looks at the polar vortex information and does not find that alarming, right? It's never happened before. When it happened the first time was the first time it's happened ever. It's never happened before. It's never happened before. We have no recorded, out of all the ways they record, climate records, have they been able to find a time when this particular phenomena has occurred, right? This is fundamentally changing what you see. And they as from what I understand, as they collect data, every time they do a new ice core, every time they do a new data point, they always add the current data point to the stream of data points, right? And as far as we know, and that's the key thing, as far as we know, this has never happened before. And as far as we know why it's happening. To the best of our knowledge at this point, it's because the air is warmer. We know the air is warmer because, go back to the shipping lanes. If you want proof, a part of the Arctic Circle has now opened up. It's completely liquid. You can buy a cruise ship ticket and cruise through it. Luxury cruise line. We are currently shipping goods across the Arctic Circle right now as we speak. There are boats there now. It does not freeze back over. That's a big change. That's a huge change. And we have thermometers in the water and in the air. Like, come on. So, if you don't think that's a bad thing, if you are somehow convinced that, I'm good, not a problem, we'll be fine. Fine, so be it. I can't convince you that this could be a problem. I find it alarming. Because people who do this all day, every day, I don't think people realize, apply the climate scientist job to what you do every day, day in, day out. That's all they do. It's like a mechanic all day long. All he does is work on cars. So if your car comes in making a certain sound, he could diagnose it with his ear, right? You can't do that. I can't do that. Just like if you're not a climate scientist, you haven't been to school for climate science and understand how the data points work, then you can't be critical of the data if you don't know what you're talking about. Especially when it's been peer reviewed. Tests have been done to peer reviewed, meaning someone's taken that and tried to prove it wrong. And instead of being able to prove it wrong, they just keep proving it right. That's what a peer reviewed study that gets confirmed means. Someone literally went out and basically called that person a liar and tried to prove that they were a liar. And when they couldn't prove they're a liar, they're like, you know what? I came up with the same result. And that includes methods as well. They test the method and the experiment. Um, I know I'm kind of rambling on that. It's just it bothers me when I hear people say the science is not conclusive. No, the science is pretty conclusive. Well, scientists have an agenda. Yeah, to find, like, if someone can prove all these scientists wrong, that's a Nobel Prize. Like, if you understand how the Nobel Prize works, if you can prove something that otherwise has not been proven, that has been proven a different way, if you can prove something to be contrary to the working model, like if you could prove the Earth was flat, you'd win a Nobel Prize. You literally fundamentally change everything we know about our universe. If you could prove that, Nobel Prize on the spot. Millions of dollars. You'd get sponsorship from a whole bunch of companies to come teach their scientists on how you understood the Earth is flat and how to change everything they know about everything. If you could prove that, if you could prove that trees could talk, you are basically set for life, right? But that hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. Um, if someone can prove that all these scientists are wrong, they literally would be. They could prove it and peer review it. That person who proved it the first time would win the Nobel Prize. Period. And seeing as that hasn't happened yet, I'm going with the best working information I got. And I can tell you, it doesn't look good. If you don't think that's real, if you don't think that it's real, if you don't think that the scientists are telling the truth, and you don't think that they know what they're talking about, and you don't think that they really, that they have some agenda and whatever, I don't know what their end game would be for someone working at a university. Like, not sure what the end game is there. But if you have to take the Candace Owens approach and don't believe the scientists, fine. Would you, if you don't think that car emissions are an issue, would you put your mouth directly in front of an exhaust pipe and breathe the air coming out of the car? No. So chances are we probably shouldn't be breathing it anyway, right? Would you do that on a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle? Well, sure, because the only thing that comes out of there is water. Won't hurt you. Would you do it with a diesel engine? Nope. Would you do it with a coal plant? Would you put your face directly in a coal plant and breathe that in for 10 minutes? No, because you die. Right? Would you pipe the exhaust from your car into the cabin with you in it? No, it's suicide. You're gonna die. Period. Point blank, period, the end. Carbon monoxide will kill you. Pumping loads of carbon monoxide into the atmosphere is probably not the best thing. I don't know. You don't have to be a scientist to figure that out. You don't have to be a scientist to figure out that dumping chemicals in water, in waterways, right? Pouring chemicals on the ground, it's probably not the best idea. Would you drink it? If you wouldn't drink it, you probably shouldn't pour it on the ground. Just saying. This is if you wouldn't drink it, right? If you wouldn't want your plants to drink it, if you wouldn't let your dog drink, like, people love their dogs, would you give your dog water that you've poured old paint chemicals into? No, because it will kill him. So we should be concerned that companies are pouring paint chemicals into the waterways and are doing it as we speak. If you don't think the climate science is real, fine. You should still be concerned about the environment because you live in it. I take the analogy of you look at taking care of the environment as taking care of your house. Would you let somebody pay you $1 million to take a dump in your house one time? Sure, why not? Would you let somebody pay you $1 million to take a dump in your house every hour on the hour? Just come in, drop trowel, take a dump right on your floor every day, right? Would you let them do that? No, I wouldn't. That's gross, right? There's not one, and I don't mean $1 million once. I mean $1 million every time, just once. I'm gonna come take a dump every hour on the hour in your house for $1 million. All you get. You have to live there though. You can't leave, right? You're stuck in there. You can't leave the house ever. This person's gonna come, drop trowel, take a dump. It could be juicy, it could be hard, you don't know, right? If you now let's flip. Now, what would be more accurate if you wouldn't do it for $1 million? Let me ask you this: would you pay someone $1 million to take a dump in your house? If your answer to that question is no, then you should be upset with the current EPA, head of the EPA, and the last one from the EPA, because that's essentially what was happening. We, as a country, are paying our hard-earned tax dollars for subsidies to companies who take a dump in our house. Period. Point blank. The end. The amount of chemicals that have been dumped into waterways, we pay subsidies to those companies with our tax dollars. You don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to be upset about that. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't pay you $10 to poop in my house. I wouldn't be you. No. The answer is no. You would not pay $1 million for someone to poop in your house. Nor would you take $1 million for someone to take unlimited poops on your floor. It's not going to happen. But that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. You got companies that are just taking this shit all over us. We're drinking the chemicals. We're breathing the chemicals. It soaks into your skin. Don't believe it. If you just because it's not around you doesn't mean it's just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. I'll leave you with this last little tidbit. If you think that it's not a real thing, or if you do think, there's a documentary on HBO. I'll try to find it and link it. I just kind of caught it randomly, but it's a good documentary about St. Louis, Missouri. That's a place I'll never be going. There's northern St. Louis, Missouri. There is a huge nuclear waste dump from the Manhattan experiment, the Manhattan Project, where we're building the atomic bomb. All the waste material, or a portion of it, was buried there. Now, later, they built a landfill there. And now it's a partially closed landfill. The people that worked there recall it snowing. When it would snow in St. Louis, it does get pretty cold there in the winter, that snow would never stick to the ground there because it was so radioactive. But the people that worked there were never told that it was radioactive. Many of them died from lots of cancers. But now that the facility's closed, and then it was moved and buried in a landfill. I think it was moved to a landfill. You have to watch it. It's been a while since I've seen it. But the radioactive material has now caught fire. And there's a smoldering fire underneath this landfill that already has radioactive material in it. Now, they made movements. They moved a lot of the material. They dug it up, moved it to another part of the landfill. But the fire keeps spreading. And what's happening is they've told the people that live there that, oh, the fire is not part of the radioactive part. But the people that live near that landfill, their dogs are covered in tumors. Kids are getting sick routinely, getting sick with cancers and leukemia and all things that happen with radiation poisoning over time, because those particles are raining down like snow all over them every single day. They have testing. They test the ground throughout the area, and routinely you'll find construction crews digging up radioactive soil and bringing in fresh backfill to clear out the radioactive material. All just random parking lots will get dug up to pull out radioactive soil from underneath. I mean, the city is literally glowing, and the people. And now there's before nobody really cared because it was a mostly black, and poor neighborhood. Well, now most of the black people left. They started building nicer houses, and the people in the trailer parks that stayed behind, and the people in these affluent neighborhoods are like, how come my kid keeps getting sick? How come I'm getting sick? How come I keep getting these skin cancers? Well, it's because you live next to a radioactive landfill that is currently on fire and raining radioactive ash all over you. And the best part about that story is our government isn't doing anything about it. To this day, they still have yet to make anyone whole. They have yet to do anything about the fact that these people are living next to basically a dirty bomb. When that fire reaches the radioactive material, it will ignite, and it will not be a smolder. The working theory is that once it reaches a certain temperature, it's a very hot fire. Once that radioactive material reaches a certain temperature, it will combust. It will chain reaction combust. which will be a trash explosion. Um, you know, like a dirty bomb, like a big dirty bomb. That could happen. That's in America right now, and our government has done nothing. No, they just keep telling them. I mean, we're talking. If you watch the documentary, the people have been fighting for years to get something done, and nothing. At the end of the documentary was just like depressing because it ended with, yeah, well, we're just gonna go ahead and let you know that we're just gonna let it smolder. Um, but yeah, this is a landfill with radioactive monitors all around it, and sirens go off every day when there's peaks in the monitors. And they're, one of the people they interviewed, her poor little dog was covered in tumors. Her little Jack Russell was covered in tumors. And while they're interviewing her, the alarms go off, which means you got to go inside and close the windows and seal up your house. But what does that do when you go outside? It's still there, right? Your grass is radioactive. The outside of your house will be radioactive. If your house draws air from inside, if you have a bathroom vent, that radioactive air is coming into your house. Just saying, if you don't think climate change is real, fine. I don't care anymore. Like, I don't care if you don't believe it. Just don't talk to me about it. Your stupid ass beliefs get no resonance here. But if you don't believe climate science, who cares? You should care about the environment because you shouldn't want to have radioactive ash rained on your skin. Your dog shouldn't get tumors because he's covered in radioactive dust from your grass. Just saying. The dog was radioactive. Before anyone says, well, dogs get tumors all the time. Well, this dog was covered in tumors. It was sad. Like, to the point where it didn't even make sense to remove them. Removing them would kill him. And furthermore, the dog's radioactive. Therefore, the lady they were interviewing was radioactive. So, just saying. Like, comment, subscribe. Everybody love everybody. Stay warm out there.